if you even do go with signs, it doesn't have to be signs on private property under a zoning ordinance. I mean, obviously, if the town chose to establish its own gateway sign that doesn't involve commercial advertising, you're free to do that as well. That's an entirely different subject. At this point, like I said, this is stage one. I would hope there are a lot of polls, otherwise you'd be accused of having decided everything before it was presented to the public. So, of course, that's the purpose of the discussion, so the board can decide if you want these signs at all. If so, do you want them eligible for private property? Do you want to just do town signs? And if so, what size sign do you want? How big can it be? Those are all the questions that have to be answered. And so, we can either take items from the board and draft something to make modifications to what you have now, or we can change directions altogether if you say, we decided we just want one town sign and we'll do it ourselves. And then you take out the commercial advertising end of it, and you're limited to your own announcements, and you control it entirely.
Thank you.
As far as procedure, we would just move to continue the public hearing at the next date, and we can make amendments and have discussion at that point.
Thank you.
I make the motion.
Motion to, next meeting is what, the 20th? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, but the next meeting is on a Wednesday, November 12th, is it 12th? Veterans Day, it's the 11th, so back in our January meeting of this year, we switched it to the to the next day. So the public hearing will remain open, will be placed on our November 12th agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. At this point, we do have our budget hearing, public hearing as well. I'm telling you, we can get through this in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, this other stuff. I know Max has to be somewhere, Max is in the back, and I want to, if it's okay with the board, if we can just skip the public hearing and just move on to these 6 items and get right through it. I don't see any of them taking more than a few minutes, so if that's okay with the board.
And we'll come back to the public.
Okay. Oh, yes, of course. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to ask Max to come up for the number 5 Waterfront zoning amendments.
I just want to clarify, Jeff, I don't have anywhere.
Oh,
I'm happy to be here,
Sit down, get a look.
but I'm glad you moved me up. I'm here tonight in association or in follow-up to the PW zoning amendments that deal with the potential waterfront development. After the last meeting, all the input that we received from you and the public, again, that was an informational-only public hearing. That wasn't a statutorily required public hearing. That will be coming in the future. But based on that good input, I had amended the zoning local law and prepared an environmental assessment form, Part 1 and Part 2, for consideration by this board. That Part 2 does identify several large impacts that have to be investigated further before this board could consider either adopting a positive declaration and moving on to an EIS process, or ending the seeker review with a negative declaration. The impact that I have identified are that this law could encourage development within a floodplain. Obviously, marinas can be developed now, but you would be incentivizing or promoting economic development in a place that's subject to floods. Additionally, it could have aesthetic impacts. Large multifamily buildings could have aesthetic impacts to the river and of the river from upland. Impacts to historical and archaeological resources. The Stony Point battlefield's right there. I think we have to investigate what this would look like, how that might interact with the Stony Point battlefield. There are potential traffic issues coming out of Tompkins Avenue, on Beach Road, East Main Street, sorry. There are emergency access concerns that have to be addressed. There are potential lighting impacts on the night sky. This is not an area that's well lit up now. We should be looking at that. Land use in sharp contrast to the existing surrounding area. We hope it's a nice contrast. We hope it's nice, high-quality housing. But we have to look at how it relates to what's there now. We have to also look at the local waterfront revitalization plan. That's something that actually George brought up. That local waterfront revitalization plan dates back to 1994. We haven't really looked at anything in that plan since then. I think we have to look at the consistency of this action with that plan and ask ourselves, do we want to amend that? Do we want to update it? Or is this consistent moving forward? We have to look at potential impacts on school, fire, police, ambulance, and any other recreational services. And lastly, we have to look at the consistency of the architecture that could be built in that area and how that relates to the character of the community. So that's going to take some time for me to get through we have people taking out traffic studies right now to explore those issues. But before we really can move on, there are a couple secret procedural issues that I'm going to ask the board to take tonight. The first would be to declare yourselves lead agency and classify the action as a type 1 action. To adopt the part 1 detailing the project attributes. Again, the project here, although I guess there's been some past interest by particular owners, we have to look at the impacts that this could have on the entire PW district. So it's going to be larger than any one project. We're going to look at the largest projects that could be built down there. We also have to forward this proposed local law, an EAF, to both the Rockland County Planning Department and the Stony Point Planning Board for their recommendations. So those are really 1, 2, 3 actions, 4 actions that I'm asking you to take. Again, declare yourselves lead agency, classify the action as type 1, adopt the part 1 and part 2 EAF, and forward this for recommendation from Rockland County Planning and the Stony Point Planning Board. And I believe as we get those recommendations back, we should have a better idea on the type of impacts that could occur with this law. And I'll come back to you and present those findings to you, and you can decide whether this is something you think can fit, whether we need to do a harder environmental look, or whether this is something you want to pursue going forward.
Excellent, Max, thank you. Would that have to be done in 4 separate?
No, I think one resolution covering all of that. I believe council had prepared something.
Yeah, we have.
I just got a quick question. All those things you said, which I think are great, does a developer, is that a cost to the developer or to the town residents?
This study you've already contracted with me. This is something that we have an approved contract to do. The impact of the law. When a developer comes in after that, they're going to have to deal with their specific impacts. So while we're going to talk about the generic impacts, the capacity of the roadway to accommodate traffic, they're going to have to tell you their project, specifically how much traffic it's going to generate and whether that will be an impact. So this is really an initial look. We call it a generic look. We're looking at the broad implications. When an actual applicant comes in, this doesn't relieve him of having to look at his site-specific impacts. But right now, we're sort of looking at the PW district. You could have one of these developments at the Stony Point Bay Marina, including other lands, larger lands, and also the area by the Penny Bridge Marina. There's actually more than 10 acres in that area where you could develop a similar mixed-use project. So we have to look at sort of what happens if everybody who's able to decides to pursue this, and look at those generically.
Max, what's the time frame for completion of this particular phase? Because that's a lot to have to, with all the engagement.
Well, the planning board has 62 days from referral. They're meeting in December. I would imagine that they'll probably either give you their opinion in December, or at most they would ask you for an extension to be able to do that in January. I believe by January we should have a good idea of the environmental impacts, so I would be looking to come back to you in January and be able to say, this is where we are. Do you guys feel we need to go further with the environmental impact statement? Do you think this qualifies for neg deck? And then once you make that decision, then you do an up-down vote on the actual law. And then once that law is in place, it's a special use permit for an applicant to come in and build one of these things. So they will, conditional use. So they will have to go to the planning board and they would still be subject to, again, site-specific secret.
And during this period of time, you're going to be doing the analysis with the 1994 committee's work, and
Yeah, I need to address that too, because there may be a requirement that you have to amend that plan in order to adopt this. I'm not sure, I have to look at that. I've looked at it already, and right now the LWRP doesn't contemplate residential development at that site, at the, around the Stony Point Bay. It
what did it contemplate?
parks, recreation, water-dependent uses like marinas, not really anything else.
Really, it contemplated much of that to basically be off the tax rolls.
Yes, and it actually talked about encouraging the provision of a public promenade. So actually expending public improvement money in that area. So it was sort of the opposite. But I have to look again because while it's not mentioned either way. It doesn't say you can't do residential, but at the same day, it's not saying you should do residential. So I'd like to have a much better informed position before I come back to you and tell you whether you need to amend that.
Thank you, Max. So I think what we need to do now is declare ourselves, I'll make an informal motion, to declare town board lead agency for the waterfront zoning amendments, and to classify action as type 1 and adopt part 2 for the waterfront zoning amendments, and refer this to the Rockland County Planning Board and the Town of Stony Point Planning Board. That's an informal motion.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Max, for your time. I appreciate it.
May I ask him a question?
Max?
Yeah. Matt, I hear all your wonderful planning. Are you taking into consideration the assessment? We had CFX running its freight line right near the waterfront in Stony Point. The trestle is 100 yards from my terrace. Okay? Just last week, there were 40 cars up in Albany that had a highly contaminated fluid, whatever it was, which is eventually going to come down through Stony Point. Here we're talking about the hot button of developing on waterfront, millions of dollars being spent, whether it be for the public or private, okay? One incident wipes that all out and this town is gone. In your study and assessment, are you taking that factor into consideration?
Yeah. I think in terms of the potential risk from location next to the railroad, I think that is something we can look at.
I think you have to.
There was actual discussion beyond just the potential for a train accident. There are other things going along on that railroad line.
If some way it can be monitored, that the town of Stony Point knows at all times what's passing through. So that,
Yeah, I think that's really an issue. I think that's separate. I think you'd want that
I think
regardless.
it has to be looked at. It has to be looked at. Thank you.
Okay, number one, correction on abstract, this is just a simple error that was in one of the abstracts, number 17, we all have in front of us, abstract number 17, Brooklyn's Nursery was entered twice by accident. We passed that last month, so we just need to change that.
So moved.
Okay, there's been a motion, any second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number two is the CDBG grant money. This is great news for the town of Stony Point. I'll fill some people in on what's going on with the restrooms up here. We ran into a problem. This is all grant money that's coming from CDBG. We've been pooling our money together and trying to get this restroom finished up here for our seniors. Unfortunately, the first day they were here, the first hour and a half they were here, they ran into a serious asbestos problem. We do have quotes to get it taken out, believe it or not, at a cost of $22,500, believe it or not, to remove some asbestos from a very small area. We were very upset about that. We were thinking we were going to have to cut the restrooms back on the way, maybe different tiles and cheaper stuff. However, we got great news from the county just last week that we have received an extra $26,000 in grant money. So we thank the county, and we have to tonight accept that. So I'll make the form of a motion to accept the extra $26,000 from the Office of Rockland County Community Development.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 3 is a property maintenance at 24 Pierce Drive. It's one of our local laws that we go in and we clean up the property that is in disrepair and cut grass or whatever it is here. So we have that in front of us. We have photos. It is grass actually, so we need a motion.
So moved.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, that's my neighborhood.
Okay. Number 4 is sump pumps. I think Kevin, I know Brian, you were going to say a few things on the sump pumps. I put it on the agenda just, I know, Kevin, if you want to just say a word or two about it, and then we'll respond. I know you asked to put this on the agenda. If you remember.
Thank you, Supervisor Finn, and members of the town board. As you're aware, Carl, Jimmy, and I have been having a very lively exchange with Dale and Wole,
Just when you say Carl and Jimmy, that's our sewer
sewer department. He's been going